Welcome to The More Perfect Union, a podcast about the joy we get from American politics, or as we like to call it around here, real debate without the hate. Hello, I'm Kevin Kelton. I'm a moderate Democrat living in Los Angeles, California.
Hi there, I'm DJ McGuire, a conservative Democrat. Yes, we do exist, or at least I do, from Suffolk, Virginia.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Cushmeiter. I'm a freelance writer, soccer mom, and liberal Democrat in Kensington, Maryland.
Hi, I'm Greg Matuzak, a very anxious, it seems, liberal Democrat and veteran of many political campaigns from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hi, I'm Molly Malloy Cooper. I'm a senior lecturer of economics at The Ohio State University and free market conservative from Columbus, Ohio. And after last week, I want to say I represent the dog and cat allergic constituency.
It's tragic. You can never come hang out with me and Helena at our houses.
And The More Perfect Union can be found on iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Facebook, and at our website, moreperfectunionpodcast.com. And I don't know whether you guys noticed it, but this week we topped over 700,000 unique downloads since we've started doing the podcast. And we're getting upwards of 10,000 listeners a week, sometimes more.
Yay, listeners.
That's amazing.
That's right. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you, listeners.
This week we want to start with jobs. This being Labor Day, we thought we should talk about labor. So I'm a very pro-union person, being a member of the Writers Guild, and I have seen firsthand what my union has done for me, but I'm sure there are other viewpoints on the panel. So I'll throw it open. What do you guys think about Labor Day? And does it even relate to labor unions, or am I conflating two different issues?
Not necessarily. The only reason we actually have Labor Day was because the American establishment at the time did not want to celebrate it on the 1st of May, which is when everyone else celebrates Labor Day. They call it May Day because that sounded too communist. So instead we kicked it into September, and Labor Day it is.
First of all, I'm a huge union supporter. Like Billy Bragg says, there's power in a union, and there's nothing truer. Places that have unions have better quality, less accidents, better trained workers, better paid workers. It's good.
Better looking workers.
How? Of course, we're talking about you.
Well, I'm throwing in SAG and after there. So
I was going to say the Screen Actors Guild probably does have better looking workers than many other unions.
The average a little bit.
Without a doubt. Anytime that I've done work with unions or for unions or in unions, I've been on both sides. It's much, much better. And it's better for employers also. And yet, it's always funny that I was just talking to a union electrician, and they get gruff from non-union electricians, and they'll say, "You guys get too much money. You make us, and the response is always, "Well, why aren't you getting this much money?"
Right.
There's this.
Right.
Yeah.
Why? Wait.
I've always wondered why people complain about the unions getting stuff for other people, and it's like, well, yes, because you don't have a union. Get a union, and hopefully you can earn that too. Molly, I have a feeling that you might have a slightly different take on this subject. What do you say?
I think in many ways the unions as currently constituted have lost their way. I'd like to see them be more collaborative in actually maintaining their brand and working collaboratively. In particular, one thing that I'm a bit struck with in debates with liberals in places like Open Fire, that the same people that are so pro-union are also oftentimes anti-police, without realizing that part of the reason why problems with the police persist is because they have a very strong union. So it's very hard to root them out and to fire them should there be abusive practices. And in particular with teachers, I find the same way. You hear of these teachers that get fired for having sexually abuse their students, and everybody says, oh, well, he was totally inappropriate, and there's a file with it, but they're never discharged because it's just so hard to get rid of them.
Fair criticism. Rebecca, what about you? What say you?
Right now, I'm very stuck on public sector unions right now, particularly teachers unions, because my governor hates them. And I'm angry at my governor because he issued a decree forcing schools in Maryland to open after Labor Day and close by June 15th, which turns calendaring the school year into kind of a nightmare. There's some mathematic problems with that. But he didn't go to public school, so I don't think we can fault him for not knowing stuff. If he'd gone to a real school, he'd be smarter.
Okay, flag on the play. Flag.
Yeah, I know.
Wait. DJ just got the joke because he didn't go to public school.
He didn't go to public school.
No, I gotta say, I just moved one of my children from a public to a private school, and I am amazed at how much more homework and higher standards and discipline there is at the private school. So,
I moved to Montgomery County. Our standards are something fairly special.
My first year in public school was in middle school, and my teachers essentially assumed, just right off the bat, that I knew more than my fellow students because I had just transferred in from St. Michael's. So they just assumed I knew more because they knew that for all of the problems that a Catholic school stuck in the 1940s for teaching methods, and this was the 1980s after all, they knew that St. Michael's, at least that the private school, particularly the Catholic school I went to, at least made sure that their kids knew stuff, for lack of a better term, and were educated in a way that public school systems, or at least North Jersey public school systems in the 1980s, didn't seem to be interested in that. Now, I don't know about Maryland. Their football team just beat Texas, so their public school system can't be doing everything wrong.
Well, the Montgomery County elementary school football team hasn't beat anybody because we haven't started school yet. Our summer, thanks to Larry Hogan's preference of Ocean City tourism over public sector unions, is now longer than a marking period. And kids are forgetting everything they ever learned. And the problem with public sector unions is that when you do get a politician who decides to make a point, and believe me, this is about the unions, he's nakedly come out and said, well, if you're having trouble with fitting all your instructional days in, what you need to do is cancel some of the union mandated professional days. You know, the 3 days a year that teachers get to do things like do report cards, really frivolous stuff, because Larry Hogan didn't go to public school and doesn't know these things.
Okay, so all great points. We talked about unions, but it is Labor Day, and there are other aspects to American labor than just the union issue. So I want to throw this out to the panel. What one thing would each of you like to see happen or hope to see happen that would improve the situation for the American labor force? For me first, I think we have to get wages up because we have low unemployment right now. We need more full-time work, and we need to start raising the wages. And for me, the way to do that is to increase the minimum wage. I don't want to make that the only focus of this particular discussion. But going back to each of you, and again, I'll start with DJ. Do you think there's anything else on the horizon that could help improve the labor market in the country?
Well, I think the first thing, it would be a bank shot for most people. And that would frankly be monetary policy. I think a lot of the productivity gains that labor has made over the last several decades, frankly, has been inflated away. Prior to the Great Depression, there were numerous examples of productivity-driven deflation, where prices fell because workers were more productive. They were paid the same wages, but the prices fell, and therefore their cost of living fell. And so they were better off. Well, after the Great Depression, the assumption among the powers that be was that deflation was bad, it was horrible, and therefore any deflation, even productivity-driven deflation, has to be inflated away. And what has happened is, in a desperate attempt to fight off inflation, in a desperate attempt to create inflation, even when it doesn't belong there, the central banks, and this is not just our central bank, every central bank has done this for the most part, has essentially fueled asset bubbles repeatedly over and over again around the world. And so workers who should have higher wages due to higher productivity aren't getting them because they're not seeing the lower prices that they should be seeing because they're inflated away. And instead of that inflation showing up in wages, it shows up in asset bubbles. So the first thing I would do is I would get the money supply instability out of the game and let deflation happen if it's productivity driven deflation, so that workers can see, yes, my wages aren't rising, but my cost of living is falling. So yes, I really am better off. We need to see more of that, not just in this country, but around the world.
Asset Bubble is the name of my hip hop album, just in case anyone was looking for some new
All right,
music.
I'm going to try to be just ever so slightly less wonkish, but DJ set a pretty high bar there. So the jobs report that came out Friday showed that wages went up 3 cents, which is not great. And I, too, am concerned about that. And I've been thinking for a while that part of this is that we have not gotten healthcare costs under control. And so employer-provided healthcare has gone up 6%. So there's 6% per year, which is, there's your raise. Rather than paying you more, your employer has to pay more for your healthcare. So that's one thing. But then the second thing, a good article in the Journal about how part of the reason why wages are not rising despite the labor market tightening and with unemployment being so low now, as well as more people coming back into the labor force, still not putting upward pressure on wages, is the baby boomers who are at the end of their careers with relatively higher wages are leaving and being replaced by younger workers. And so would still like to see those wages come up. And I think part of it is we do need to actually address costs in our healthcare.
I'm going to kill any of my presidential career options right now. So be careful. Someone record this. I would kill. All your ideas are great, but let's be clear. I would kill coal. I mean, we are done, and by looking for new energy, we are adding more and more jobs every year in new energy, and we are moving towards that, and we are draining our economy and jobs and putting more and more unemployment on old technology that is killing our economy in Pennsylvania and coal company in Southeast Ohio. Kill it. Done. How many years do we have left in it? 10, 15, 50 if the coal people have their way, or we kill it nicely. Okay, start transferring these people to jobs in like solar energy. Yes, wind, something that would work. Nanotechnologies, something that's cool. Have Elon Musk come out and hand them pamphlets and say, now you work for me in SpaceX. Sounds sexy as hell. And start giving them jobs and training. And all of a sudden, we are on Mars. Awesome.
And I just saw our listenership in Kentucky fall off the cliff.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
So what's going on with that? Like, coal's somewhat back. It's done better in 2017,
not
and it's
back. They added a couple of hundred jobs. Come on.
No,
hipsters. Hipsters with your records.
It's back, and it's not us. After being told that we're the only ones that do coal, it's back because of exports. Our coal exports are way up.
Yeah, we're sending it to like third world countries, or no?
Yeah, the places that don't have unions, and so they can't bargain for clean air in the workplace.
Yeah, because the good news is their smog can't get over here.
Yes.
Rebecca, what do you think?
Oh, I'm going to go full liberal here, baby.
More liberal than me?
More liberal than you. I want to add 2 years on to mandatory public education. I want to make a high school degree the equivalent of an associate's degree. I want to create 2 more years for skills training and workforce training, as well as pre-college training, potentially tracking. I haven't thought this all through because I'm not an education policy person, but we keep young people out of the workforce for 2 more years without them accruing debt. If they're in high school for 2 more years, we add on more education. We don't have to compress so many subjects, and we get to increase the number of subjects taught so that we're not just teaching 16 different iterations of algebra, but we can expand into vocational education, technological education, workforce training, life skills
music
training.
education.
Music education. I can't believe I didn't say that first, Greg. I'm sorry.
So
Thanks.
That's really interesting. So it seems to me what you just did is you took a campaign rallying cry from the Democrats from 2016, which is free college tuition for 2-year programs. But you're repackaging it in, I think, a slightly different way, which I think is interesting. Can you explain that again? How do you see it working?
We have a 13th and a 14th grade.
So we just extend high school. Obviously, that means that we would have to increase classrooms. We would have to increase staff, teachers, administrative costs. Where is this money going to come from? I love the idea. I'm not arguing it.
We're going to tax the rich.
Tax the rich.
Like I said, I'm going full liberal. Let's tax the rich. Tax them. We'll tax Joel Osteen.
Where else would we get it from?
We'll tax Donald Trump. I don't know. I'm never good. All my years of advocacy, I was on the policy side. I can propose policies. I can propose ideas, but somebody else has to come up with how to pay for it. I do not know how to do that. That's
paying
not
for
my
it is a big part of it.
The pay for it is always a big part of it, but it's not like we're short of money in this country. There's money floating around. We just have to decide how we want to use it. We could pay for a wall, or we could send people to 2 more years of high school. I know which I think is a better idea. I think I know which would work better.
Right, but in fairness, as you know, I'm no fan of the wall, but we're talking about a $20 billion outlay versus something that probably would be hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure. But this is an idea that's been floating around in my head, and it seems like it's a solution to a lot of problems. But that, governors hate teachers' unions and don't want to give them anything more, and nobody wants their kid to have to go to school any longer, and it's expensive and it's difficult, and it would be a big change. But that doesn't make it a bad idea.
If you're going to extend high school, if you're going to extend high school for 2 years, I want the voting age moved back up to 21.
Okay.
But can we move the drinking age down?
It's not a terrible idea, but as somebody who has 2 kids in high school, I think we can. Well, first of all, we do need better job training, and we do have a lot of unfilled tech jobs, which is part of the reason why wages are not going up, because we just don't have people to be able to take those higher skilled, higher paid jobs. And so, but again, as someone who has 2 people in high school, two students in high school, we could get a lot more of that job training done while they're in high school. I don't know that we need to extend it out. We just need more vocational training within high school itself. I think, there could be a lot accomplished in basic skills that people need in high school and get tech skills along with that.
Okay. Well, I think we've covered Labor Day and given it a fair focus of our discussion, but there are other things happening in the world this week.
The real focus is that my son's Cub Scout troop is marching in a parade tomorrow. Let's face it, that's what Labor Day is all about.
That is what that and the barbecues, absolutely.
Yes.
And speaking of barbecues, North Korea set off a hydrogen bomb.
Oh, God.
I'm so proud of my segues. North Korea set off a hydrogen bomb. I believe it was yesterday or last night when we're taping this.
Have we fired a missile over a Spratly Island yet?
We have not.
Then we're doing it wrong.
So what did you think of what Secretary Mattis said today, DJ?
Useless. Utterly useless. More words.
And yet less useless than the president would have been.
More words. And frankly, these are, people treat these words as if they are new or somehow frightening. Dwight Eisenhower threatened to blow up the world at least twice a week. It was he who came up with the notion of massive retaliation.
Could you be more, because I don't know about that. Could you be more specific about that? I'm serious. I don't know about that.
Eisenhower? Yeah. When Quemoy and Matsu, which were 2 islands that are part of Taiwan, I think they're called Kinmen and Matsu now. When Mao Zedong kept threw a couple of shells at them and bombed them a bit in 1958, the Eisenhower administration made clear that if China continued that, we would essentially launch a full nuclear strike on all of China and irradiate the thing. Mao backed off.
Okay, I want to just jump in. You say essentially, and I'm going to take your word for it, DJ, because frankly, you know about the period of time apparently better than I do. But I'm betting that he did not say it the way Mattis said it today. Mattis today mentioned North Korea and said, while we are not looking to annihilate another country, we have the means to do it if we need to. Now, I'm paraphrasing him, but that's pretty close to what he said.
Right, and the Eisenhower administration never used the word annihilation. The phrase they like to use is called massive retaliation.
Yes, and that's very different. That's my point. Even during the Cuban Missile Crisis, which I am old enough to remember, and of course we've all seen, the newsreels of Kennedy's speeches at that time. Even at the bleakest moments of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the rhetoric was not as heated as it became this weekend. That's just my point.
And it's funny you should mention the Cuban Missile Crisis, because that actually gives us a window into what should be done here. Because what Kennedy did, I don't think Kennedy was perfect during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think the Turkey thing was a disaster. But the one thing he did that was right was he made it abundantly clear that in his mind, anything Cuba did was essentially something that Moscow did. And that therefore Moscow would be on the hook for anything Fidel Castro had in mind, whatever he thought to do. We do not have the same statement and policy towards the Chinese Communist Party. There is no threat anywhere out of Washington, even as Washington talks about annihilating North Korea. There is no threat at all about punishing Beijing for what North Korea is doing.
I'm hearing a lot more talk today, though, than previously about secondary sanctions and going after the Chinese at this point.
Yes, but DJ is talking about a military retaliation.
Show of threat.
What I'm talking about is similar to what North Korea did to Japan, which was fire a ballistic missile over their territory and had it splash over. What I would say is there are plenty of Spratly Islands in the South China Sea that are illegally occupied by the Chinese Communist Party. It would not bother me at all. In fact, I would be very happy if we flew a few missiles over them and splashed on the other side. I would even be good for hitting a few of the uninhabited Spratly Islands, although I know that's probably extreme for 98.6% of America, and I'm probably underestimating that. My point is, Beijing needs to be held accountable, and by being held accountable, I don't mean just the secondary sanctions threat, which are at least a good start. I mean they need to be as afraid for their military installations in the illegally occupied Spratly Islands as we are now afraid for our allies who are having missiles flying over them.
This is when I heard this last. I woke up to hearing about this. My first thing was not the retaliation. My first thing was I'm really worried about the leadership, because how these people are handling this. And first of all, sending missiles is not going to help. Maybe sending an envoy and saying, hey, let's take this back 3 steps. Let's talk about this, perhaps.
Who do you want to talk to?
Escalating.
Greg, who do you want to talk to?
What do you mean, who are we going to talk to? They have a leader. They have. If we can negotiate a nuclear arms deal with Iran, which I think we did, and
yes,
my
we basically said, sit tight on your nuclear weapons program.
This.
You can keep it all, but don't do anything forward, and you can have ballistic weapons in 8 years.
Oh, that's
not a
true.
deal.
Yes, it was.
Hold on. I'm going to jump in here. I could let a lot of things go on this program, but if people are going to sit here and try to pretend that the Trump administration is handling the North Korean threat better than the Barack Obama administration handled the Iranian threat.
I'm not saying that at all.
Please.
Whoa.
Okay,
I'm not saying that at all, Kevin. Whoa, no.
Let's not bring up the Iranian deal.
I am not saying that
ridiculous.
at all.
We got them to stop their nuclear program. That deal got them to stop their nuclear program for at least 10 years. So this idea that you're going to go back and retroactively hit Barack Obama, let's talk about the real problem, which is what is the Trump administration going to do about a problem that, yes, they inherited, and yes, they've only been on the job for 9 months now, but they're really having a big problem handling this threat. I don't see that they have any play.
Well, it's not like they inherited it out of the blue. Administrations have been inheriting North Korea as a problem since the Korean War. This is not new. Kim Jong-un is mildly new, but it's not like we didn't expect all of this. The fact that Trump didn't know that there was a North Korea before he became president is a real problem, and his lack of planning for it now continues to be a problem.
Look, I still hold by my assumption that you can always trust the Trump administration to do the wrong thing. That's not the issue here. Okay. My point is, Greg, and the reason why I jumped down your throat on this is because if you're insisting on talking to North Korea, then you don't understand the problem. North Korea is not the problem. Beijing is the problem. Beijing is North Korea's enabler. Beijing is actually North Korea's colonial master. I mean, the Kim family essentially their
Well, then maybe tell Jared Kushner to stop trying to build shit there.
Well, that's... And I don't necessarily dispute that, Rebecca. I mean, my point is the Chinese Communist Party is the problem. They are the central problem here. They are using North Korea. They have always used North Korea to scare us and to distract us, and it is continuing to work for them. While we've been focused on North Korea, they have bullied Vietnam out of drilling in its own exclusive economic zone for oil because the Chinese claim, the Chinese Communist Party claims the entire South China Sea is their own lake. They have continued to be able to play with, or they've continued to create a standoff with India over Doklam, which now seems to be, thankfully, scaling down because we were so distracted over North Korea. Beijing is the problem here. And if you say, oh, well, we'll just talk to North Korea, you give Beijing a victory, and it will solve nothing. We tried. This is the thing here. North Korea is now breaking a promise they made in 2007 to stop breaking a promise they made in 1994, to stop breaking a promise they made in 1985.
All right, let's step back. First of all, as far as India goes, since you mentioned that, Trump just this week nominated an ambassador to India. Okay. And I think here lies a big problem. There are 534 open spots in the State Department that Trump has not nominated. Doesn't care. Kind of wants to reserve power and break it down so that when these positions, these issues come up, such as an international crisis, a bomb goes off, and what do? Undersecretaries, secretaries, things that these people have been trained to do. Chaos. Go to the military. That's not how this is supposed to work. Okay? People on... Yeah, and I think this is the issue, that one of the issues, because Lord knows I have a lot of issues with this administration. They are not doing their job. We were told, don't worry, he has people, top people, to do his job, to help him with his job. Thank you. I know you got that reference. To help him with his job, but he's not getting those top people.
But getting back to the topic of Korea, let me just throw this out. I heard somebody on CNN this morning say something that blew my mind. I never really thought of it this way. They said, the reason that China and also Russia are not stepping in to stop the North Korean nuclear program is because they want North Korea to be a nuclear power. It actually enhances their world position because the more nuclear powers aligned against the United States, the weaker the United States is. So they see the North Korean nuclear threat not as a threat to them, but as enhancing their power and prestige in the world.
That man needs a job in the administration. Whoever the heck that, assuming it was a man. If it was a woman, then that woman needs a job. That person needs a job in the administration right now.
Commentator. And Trump really likes people who've been on TV, so maybe they could get a job on the administration.
So you disagree with that point, is what you're saying?
No, I completely agree with
totally
it. It's absolutely right.
Oh, okay.
That person needs a job in the administration to bring some sanity to it. My apologies for the confusion there.
But you've been saying that we should be putting pressure on China to force them to intercede.
Yes, we should. And that whoever that commentator was recognizes that Beijing likes North Korea's nuclear power as a way to distract us and to move against us. The only way we're going to get North Korea to, quote, back down is by essentially making it clear to the Chinese Communist Party that they can't play this game with us anymore, that they can't use North Korea as a thrust against us without serious consequences. North Korea has been able to wreak havoc with American foreign policy in the region, and Beijing gets to just sit back and reap the benefits of it without any consequences. That needs to change.
Now, I heard one more thought this morning on one of the news shows that North Korea is actually pushing up their program because of Trump's unpopularity. And as their whole feeling is that as Trump becomes a weaker president, which when his popularity dips from the 30...
It started like 38 and he's down to 32.
Right. He becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, then Congress won't back him in any military action. So they feel embiggened, as the quote goes. So
another Simpsons reference.
Thank you. I'm on a roll here. They feel embiggened to actually pull these shenanigans. And they're testing the waters to actually see what will happen. And it makes a lot of sense. Now, whether Trump is going to be like that substitute teacher who's like, go on, test me, see what will happen. But like a substitute teacher, when you have ratings in the low 30s, you don't actually have power. You can't, pull stuff off.
Okay. Well, another thing that Trump is going to be doing this week, whether we like it or not, is he's going to announce his decision, I believe on Tuesday, his decision for what to do with the Dreamers and how to proceed with DACA. My guess is that he's going to back down from some of his more bellicose rhetoric about where these people are going to be in 10 years that he's made in the past. What do you guys see coming down the pike?
All right, I got a couple things. First of all, this whole DACA thing, why he's announcing it on Tuesday, is because the federal government is being sued by several states, similar to DAPA, which was the program for the parents of American-born children. And successfully, actually, that was overturned. So something is going to have to be done about it by either Trump or the court system. And we're in this uncomfortable position because it was not handled legislatively. It was an executive order. And it is time to do something about it. I had kind of a sense that with getting rid of the Bannon wing, that it might be that he's softening on DACA. But really, when it comes down to it, I think it's going to be pushed out. They're going to be fine for now, maybe 6 months, but going to put pressure on Congress to deal with it, to codify it, to make it law. But with that, we have to have the wall. And honestly, not that I want the wall per se, but I do think that tightening up and having better border security is part of it, because this needs to be something that's done as a once and for all thing. We can't continue we can say if you're already here and you were brought as a young child, that's fine, but we have to disincentivize people from bringing their young children here going forward, and we can't do that unless the border is more secure.
All right. Let me tell you exactly how Tuesday's thing is going to come out. He's going to come out to the Rose Garden. He's going to say, I just want to let you know this is the biggest group I've ever had here. This is probably the biggest. You've never seen so many people for this announcement ever. And then he's going to pick up a bucket of chum, just blood and guts, and he's going to throw it out to his base. And there's going to be just sharks jumping everywhere. And he's going to say what he always does. He's just going to do the most least human, baseless thing, and everyone's going to go crazy. He's going to say, all dreamers, if you see one, you're going to go back to your country. And then he's going to say, for the safety of America. And all that blood and chum is going to go everywhere. And the base is going to be like sharks. And he's going to say, by the way, did you see how large my hands are? And then he's going to go back in. And that's how that is going to go.
So, Greg, are you saying this will be a political Sharknado?
That's an evocative image there, Greg.
Yes. Thanks. I've been, it's part of my whole Trump fan fiction that you can find on my other site.
But it's anti-fan fiction. It's like hate fiction.
No, all fan fiction is fan fiction.
Rebecca, what do you see for Tuesday?
I see him doing what he just did with the trends in the military policy, where he's going to order Congress to go get Trey Gowdy to investigate it for 6 months or something, and make statements about security that are effectively meaningless, that have no substance, that sound great to the base. And but he's not going to make any actual policy, and he's going to kick it to Congress, who's also not going to make any actual policy because they don't want to, because 2018 is coming.
I think he's going to make an announcement, and it's going to be something like this. From this day forward, this country will not allow people of blah, 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 blah. What he's really going to do is allow DACA to continue by grandfathering in everybody that's in the country, but he's going to make it look like he's drawing a line that doesn't exist. And I think it's going to be a play to his base. I could be wrong. That's my guess.
No, that wouldn't surprise me.
Everything's a play to his base. That's all he's got.
That's probably the closest to what I think I would say, Kevin, is that he will say no more, essentially, no one from September 5th onward, there will be no deferred action against any one man, woman, or child. But for anyone who is a beneficiary of the deferred action, we will leave them alone. That's probably the closest to what he will actually
Right,
do.
but I don't think he's going to be that honest about it. I think he's going to downplay the second part, let the commentators point that out, but he's going to make the first part of it, how tough he's being going forward, the focus. He'll make some reference to it. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll surprise us all and say it in a humanitarian way.
He did say something like we love the Dreamers. I mean, just a couple days ago. So.
Yeah, but he thinks the Dreamers are like a troupe of strippers from Houston.
Has anybody noticed that ever since Trump became a presidential candidate, and it's increased since he's become president, all of a sudden he loves everybody. All of a sudden he's become a 60s hippie.
Do you think he smells like patchouli?
It rings a little hollow to me. The other thing coming up this week, I believe that there's going to be some discussion of the debt ceiling in Congress when they return. We have to roll in Harvey funding, and there's still the issue of the wall. The last thing I heard was that Trump was not going to make the wall a red line in the sand. Did I just make two metaphors in one there? A line in the sand. There is no such thing as a red line in the sand unless you're throwing chum, which is what Greg was talking about.
Which is what he's doing. He's just throwing that chum in the sand.
He's chumming the desert.
metaphors.
Nice.
Really?
I just want to say, I think regarding the debt ceiling, they will find some way to lift it because they always do. But can we just all acknowledge that the original purpose of the debt ceiling, which was designed as some sort of check on government spending and borrowing getting out of control, can we just acknowledge it has failed in that objective and it needs to go? I mean, this is ridiculous. It doesn't actually do anything.
It's a debt tarp or a debt canvas.
Right.
It is not a debt ceiling.
It does not do what it's supposed to do.
No, it doesn't. You're right. But like so many things in government, yes, we know it doesn't work the way it's supposed to, but something has to replace it. What do we replace it with?
No, nothing has to replace it. It can simply be repealed, and you can simply say, we're not going to impose a debt ceiling anymore. Government can borrow whatever the heck it wants, depending upon what Congress chooses to spend and how Congress chooses to tax, which is frankly the way
Oh my
it
gosh.
should
But that
be.
is anathema to conservative
I love
fiscal
that.
policy. I would imagine. Yeah,
I love
liberals
that
would
idea,
love
though.
it.
So
Except-
Hamiltonian.
no,
I kind of want to hum some Hamilton here.
The fact of
Save
the
it for your
matter
rap
is,
album, Rebecca.
yeah, funny. The fact of the matter is, if the debt ceiling were effective in holding down public borrowing, we wouldn't have debt levels as we have them right now. It is pure symbolism, and by pure symbolism, I mean it does not actually do anything that it symbolically is supposed to do. And frankly, it should go away. We should have better arguments about spending and taxation without the debt ceiling, without putting essentially an empty gun to our head and pretending we're going to kill ourselves.
Molly, do you agree with this as a conservative?
I agree with DJ in this case. I mean, again, it's nice in theory, but in practice, it has not served us well. If it served us well, we would not be 20.
Would you be willing to write a letter to our terrible Senator Rob Portman, telling him that? Because
I will write a letter to our terrible Senator Sherrod Brown saying that we have to get real about our spending habits.
I'd be good with that letter too, Molly. That's an excellent letter.
Rob Portman won't accept any of my letters anymore after I called him a whore. So
that was a good episode when you called Portman a whore.
Speaking of letters, I'm always looking for a transition. Greg, didn't you get an interesting letter this week?
I did. I got a letter from one of our listeners who told us, this is a great transition, by the way, that their youngest son, I want to say his name is Noah, although he has two sons. I got to be careful.
If you're
every time he
forget people's
hears
names, Greg, make sure you drink before the podcast to use it as an excuse.
I know. Every time he hears our podcast's theme song, whenever because he listens, his son starts twerking, and his son is only 20 months old. So
that's funny because Kevin also starts twerking whenever he hears our podcast theme.
I know. So thinking about that, our podcast will probably be his earliest political memory. It will probably be like, this is probably going to be ingrained in his subconscious, that and twerking.
That is so cool. Well, I'm sure many of our fans twerk when they hear the show. I do go through epileptic spasms by the fifth time I've heard the podcast.
Without a doubt. I'm sure you do.
You know, you just handed me another great transition. Speaking of earliest political memories, we were talking before the podcast. We were talking about some of our earliest memories, and we thought it might be fun to share that. Who wants to go first? Who has an unusual early political memory?
Do you want my earliest political memory or the politician who turned me into an activist?
Either or.
Well, my earliest political memory is Reagan being shot.
Okay.
I was in about third grade, and I knew my parents were not supporters of Ronald Reagan, but I also knew that getting shot was bad. So that I was able to work two tracks in my mind even then. But what really turned me into an activist was Jesse Helms trying to defund the National Endowment for the Arts because he thought Robert Mapplethorpe's retrospective at the Corcoran, which was funded by the National Endowment for the Arts, the exhibit was funded. The Corcoran received funding. Robert Mapplethorpe did not receive funding to create his photographs, which is an important distinction. He was just an iconic photographer. That act of a United States senator struck me as egregious and unnecessary, and it was the first time I realized that politics could affect people like me because I was a creative person at that time, and I was very angry about it, and I wrote my first major political term paper on it.
Molly, what about you? Do you have an early political memory?
I mean, I wouldn't call it an unusual one, but I do remember the backdrop mostly of the 1980 election and in particular the hostages and, tying yellow ribbons around the trees when they cem back and things like that.
The yellow ribbons. The sister of one of the hostages.
That would be earlier.
Town, so yeah. I remember that too now.
Did you guys remember having to drive with your lights on? To raise awareness of the hostages?
No, actually, I don't remember that. Okay.
No.
I do. I remember telling my mom that because you'd see people with their lights on during the day, and I'd ask my mom. She goes, "Oh, it's for the hostages," and I'd say, "Oh, quick, turn your lights on." And she goes, "Are you kidding? Our battery. I'm going to forget it." She goes, "What do you want me to do? Run my battery out?"
It's the energy crisis. What are you talking about?
Right. She's like, we're going to be standing in line. And she goes, this doesn't help them. There's better ways. I was like, oh, really? What? And she goes, I don't know, but I'm sure there's better ways. She doesn't really talk like that, but I can't really do an imitation.
With that, we've run out of time, so I want to thank everybody for listening. Please follow us on Twitter at MPU Podcast and on Facebook at facebook.com/More Perfect Union Podcast. And if you like debate and want to join us in debate online between shows, please look for us in our Facebook political group, Open Fire Politics. We're all there, and we'd love to see you there too. Until next week, have a great Labor Day, and thanks for listening.